Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here again. My name is Elikem Tamaklo, and I'm the MD of Nyahu Medical Center, but today I am going to be talking to you about this area, mental health. It's an area that is very personal for me because my personal journey has navigated the waters of mental health, and I've come to realize how important it is for all of us to take care of ourselves, not just our physical body, but our mental. And sometimes everything starts from how we are thinking about our situation, and it's about aligning the two. So it's a pleasure to be here today. And at least once a month, I've started committing to talking with you and sharing really about topics that are important to myself, but topics that we are grappling with as an organization, as a society, as a country. And I believe that as you come into the room, I'm sure you'll be coming in and out. But please do engage by asking as many questions, putting as many comments in the chat room so that we can have a very interactive session. Today I'm joined by Dr. Lillian Oheny, a clinical psychologist who has been a partner and a friend and someone who's really had an enormous impact, especially in our organization over the last year and a half. So I'd like to welcome her in. She'll be coming in shortly. And so you can expect to have an expert or someone who's in this area who'll be sharing some thoughts about how all of us need to think about our mental health. And we need to all not just be aware of it, but we need to be action orientated and make some good choices. Let me start by sharing a few statistics, because when we talk about mental health, the reality is that this is a pandemic on its own. You look at around the world, we talked a lot about COVID-19. We've talked a lot around healthcare, but from a physical side. But the impact on stress, anxiety has been significant. And we're not talking enough about the impact of the pandemic on our mental health and well-being. Even before COVID-19, this was a silent pandemic. In Ghana, where we have so many people who are living with some sort of mental health disorder, the reality is that a lot of this is underdiagnosed. And the reality is that most people, almost 8 out of 10, at some point in their lives will have some sort of mental health disorder. And we say mental health, but what does that mean? Because it's such a spectrum, such a wide spectrum, that sometimes we say the word and it means different things to different people. So I know that people think, oh, if you have a challenge with your mental health, then that means you're crazy. Or you see words like people going mad, or you see people being paranoid. And we think of a spectrum of mental health as the extreme, or as a disorder that is commonly depicted in television or in radio we see on the streets. But oftentimes we don't consider the things like anxiety, how we manage stress. We don't think about the things that relate to just even how we find calm and peace of mind in situations that can be stressful outside of ourselves. And how we manage those situations sometimes leads us to feel that stress in physical ways. So people sometimes manifest stress or manifest their mental health by having pain at a certain part of their body. And so when I was a practicing clinician, sometimes I would see people coming in with the same pain on the same side, but you would do so many physical investigations and they would always come back as negative or normal, but there was something else going on. So this is an issue that covers such a wide spectrum that we cannot cover the details today. But what we can do is, or what I can do, is share my story, and share my story of how this came to be a topic that I've come to prioritize, even more so higher than my physical health. So I grew up in a medical household, so I was always aware of healthcare. But when I went to practice as a doctor, I understood the theory of mental health. I was taught how to diagnose it when other people were coming to me. And a lot of times I would treat people, I remember treating people who felt like they wanted to give up on life, suicide. I would treat people who would actually come into the emergency room having cut themselves, or even the simplest thing, alcohol abuse. People who would come having had a history of drinking alcohol because that was the only way they could cope. And so, as a clinician or as a doctor, it was always something I was taught to diagnose in other people. As you know, doctors sometimes see themselves as other because we're normally treating people, or any healthcare professional has been taught to treat a patient. But we forget that we are patients ourselves, and sometimes to the detriment of our own health, our own families, and our own societies. I moved back to Ghana in 2015, and I didn't realize that I was coming to meet an organization that was in a change. It was an amazing organization. I mean, I'm so proud to lead Yahoo Medical Center. I actually came in optimistic and very excited because I could see how we as an organization could play a part in Ghana's healthcare system rejuvenation, transformation. I came to make impact, all of these big ideas. I came and had energy to do so. Like so many people who are at the beginning of their journey, I really wanted to create impact. But, like every story, I did not foresee the challenges ahead. There were challenges to do with how to manage high stress situations where people were coming in with significant needs. My own team members having challenges at home, challenges to do with their families, health issues. My wife delivered our firstborn child at Nyaho, and my wife was not from Ghana. So there was a lot of pressure on me because as she was delivering, I knew we could take care of most cases, but it was really the small chance that something would go wrong. And the question was, would I feel responsible? How much work had I done to ensure the safety? And so my child was born as an emergency. And like any father who's having their firstborn child, I mean, that was a stressful time because my child was born with what you call respiratory distress. We needed to do some interventions, and the team were amazing. But no matter what the team was doing, it was about how I handled that situation, the stress, because the next day I had to go back to work, and I had to make sure the organization was running. So it was not surprising that I started to wake up early. Every time I'd start waking up, and even when my daughter, my baby, was in the room, I could not sleep because I was always going to her bedside to see if she was still breathing. The fear for me was that she would stop breathing and I'd be asleep, and I would not be able to wake up in time to save her. Now, understand that I am a doctor. I know that this is actually not, most babies are fine, and that was the same situation. My baby was fine, but this was a very stressful time and I was very anxious. So in that same year, in that first year, we got broken into. When my wife was pregnant, someone came into our room and took the phones from our heads where my phone was charging, and also took some money. Now, we slept through it. I think they were using something, but we woke up only to find that things had been stolen. And that was the first shock. This was before my wife had delivered. But after she gave birth, for a second time, someone came into our room. And obviously it was a question as to how do they know all the defenses that we put in place, what was happening. But this happened around 4 a.m. And so I could not sleep. Every 4 a.m. I would wake up. I would, like clockwork, wake up at 4 a.m. just because I would look out of the window and I needed to protect my family. I can go on and on about different challenges because there were many. In that same year, we lost one of our team members suddenly. He was someone who had come to mentor and had grown to, really see his future. And one day he just didn't turn up to work. He had been there the day before and in his sleep had died. So you can see that the challenges were mounting up, and this is not just running a business, running an organization that has over 350 people. It was actually extremely stressful, but some of the challenges were normal. What we all go through, all of us have gone through some shape or form, some sort of trauma. But I had a crisis point. The first time I had a panic attack was in 2017. 2017, I was dealing with a lot of stress. It was a culmination. And because I was so passionate about what I was doing, I was pushing myself. I did not sleep enough. I wasn't sleeping well. I hadn't taken leave. I hadn't taken time off. I was really burning the midnight oil both sides, waking up early, sleeping late, sending emails late. And so my panic attack was at home, and I was feeling like the ground was swallowing me. I could not breathe. All of a sudden, I felt like my life was ending, and I was just gasping for breath. And thankfully, my wife was beside me, and my wife just was with me in this time, rubbing my back, and saying that it would be okay, and I started to regain some sense of control. I'm sharing this because I realized that the tools that I had developed in the past were not relevant for the situation I was in. I was under-equipped to deal with the stress that was coming to me. I had been thankful to have had coaches along the way, but this is whereby I realized that if I did not make some significant changes, I would find myself compromised and not only affecting myself, but affecting my family and then my community. So I want to share this because each one of us goes through these situations. They're normal. All of us have gone through situations like this, and it is normal. Our ability to deal with stress and sometimes requiring new skills matters. And so what did I do? I started to exercise. I was an avid person. I would do exercise every day before I came to Ghana. And because I was so busy, I stopped doing exercise. So I started exercising. I got myself a counselor, a coach, who actually was working with people who are in high stress jobs. And we started talking about shifting my calendar. And so I started applying my appointment system rigorously because I knew that I would have to go home and spend time with my family so that I could lighten up. I had to force myself to take leave, even though there was a lot going on. So you can imagine that these are very simple things, but as I started to put these things in place, I started to find that I had more capacity, more ability to handle stress. All of a sudden, I was being more productive. I was making better decisions. I also started to write and journal. So every time I would write what was going on in my head and then analyzing that from a perspective of, did that make sense? Was that the truth? And so sometimes when you're thinking, your mind is moving so quickly, you don't really know what's going on, but I had to slow myself down. And that was something that really helped me. So I just want to show you that 2017, 18, 19, this was me now really putting structures and tools in my life that could help me. And I found myself really succeeding. But you know what had happened is that the stress that I'd gone through and not managing the stress pushed my body. And so I developed high cholesterol, even though I was quite slim. My body was pushed to the edge, and I had high cholesterol. At a young age, I was 32 when I needed to actually start taking tablets because just trying to manage my diet alone was not helping. It was just going up and up and up. So, I just want to show you that your physical conditions, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all of these are connected. And actually, when we are stressed, our mind produces a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is useful. Stress is good in the short term, but if we don't manage it, it affects our body. And that's what we want to talk about today. I mean, I didn't really want to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic because all of us have gone through that. So I want to really highlight that before COVID-19 came, mental health was a big issue. And I really wanted to highlight that it is not just the pandemic that has caused people to actually find that they're going through a lot more. But what the pandemic did was to push all of these things to the forefront. So if you were struggling in one area and you hadn't found a way of increasing support, then the pandemic pushed it so that it actually was revealed. And so in one way, what the pandemic has done has been to show us the things that we need to focus on, the things that we need to work on. The pandemic has brought them to the forefront, almost like a sifting of sand. So, I mean, in 2020, with the COVID-19 pandemic, that really pushed me even more so than I'd ever gone through in my life. And I needed to increase the level of support again. Where you have high stress, you need to increase the support. And even though I was doing all of these things, and I was handling a lot, but even then, I still needed to increase that by getting a clinical psychologist. And that's where Dr. Lillian Oheny comes in, because she came in to support our organization. Our organization was very much dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. We had doctors and nurses who were seeing patients coming in. And unfortunately, the patients who were coming in were those with chronic disease, chronic conditions, and a number of them passed away. A number of them died. So you can imagine the stress that the healthcare professionals were dealing with, especially in an area where there was no resources. So I really want you to see that as an organization, because we brought in that clinical psychologist, Dr. Oheny, the reality and what I found out was that even for me at the time when she came in, I actually felt that I was doing okay. And it's only when I had another panic attack that it was like, okay, for what I thought I was doing okay, I need to increase more support. I took the offer of meeting with her, and we met a few times, and it was fantastic. It really changed my life because it taught me another skill. So right now, I'd like to say that I have a toolkit where I can use different tools at different times, and it makes me a stronger leader. So with that said, that is my story, and it's really to illustrate that we all are going through stress of some shape or form. And mental health is a wide topic. I've only touched on anxiety, but there's depression, feeling so low. I've felt like this as well. Feeling so low that you don't even know how you're going to wake up or get out of bed. So what I want to do is to say we are all going through some shape or form, and we need to start talking about mental health. So I'd like to invite Dr. Oheny, or Dr. Oheny, Lillian, welcome to my conversation. And please, I would like you to just, just for everyone's sake, just talk about who you are, your name. I mean, I've mentioned it, but what have you been doing in your career to bring you to where you are right now? Please come in.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Tamaklo. It was a pleasure working with you. You are one of my loyal clients. Psychotherapy works very well if the client cooperates. I always say that it's a 70-30 affair, where the client actually does 70% of the job, and then the therapist does only 30%. So it's a collaborative effort. I am Lillian Oheny, like Dr. Tamaklo rightly said. I trained as a clinical health psychologist and from the University of Cape Coast. My work, actually, I am a mental health professional. So in my line of work, I assess, diagnose, and manage mental health issues. Mental health is broad, so it has to do with our thoughts, our behavior, and then our mood. And also, there's a part of cognition and mental health. So, and as part of my duty, there are some people who may be having challenges learning, sustaining attention, paying and sustaining attention, and then staying focused to task. Sometimes it may be because of their emotions. Other times it may be because they may be having a cognitive impairment or a deficit in their cognition. So in that line, there's a need to do neuropsychological assessment to ascertain what may be causing if there is a change or difficulties in the person's life. So generally, this is what I do. I have been with Nyaho Medical Center. I used to be on call from 2018. And then in 2019, October, I joined Nyaho Medical Center consulting at the Octagon branch. And then when the need arises for me to be at the airport branch, I come in. But currently, I have weekend Saturday clinics at the airport branch as well. So mental health, like Dr. Tamaklo rightly said, the current statistics I have is that in Ghana, about 25% of our population have one mental health issues to the other. It has been like, if we say mental health, we want to see some significant abnormalities in the person's behavior before we can say that the person has a mental health issue. So what has been known by the general populace is that the person is dirty, is in a tattered cloth, is speaking to himself, seated outside, ignored, then the person has mental health. But that is just an aspect of mental health issues that we have to deal with. And the silent ones are the ones that we deal with in our own closet, in our rooms, and in our own homes. And if these ones are managed, then we will be seeing few, or better still, none, walking on the streets, because at that point, the early intervention might have set in. So as a psychologist, I mostly diagnose depression, anxiety, stress in various forms, and then some cognitive disorder. There are some biological issues that may cause a person to have some form of emotional issue. So usually it's a liaison between a medical doctor and then a clinical psychologist, depending on the history that I take. So if you come to my consulting room, we spend a lot of time. I think mostly my clinic is the longest clinic at Nyaho and everywhere. So mostly you will see that my bookings are, I'll book you for an hour. And sometimes we will spend 1 hour and then we exhaust whatever we have. So that there's a holistic assessment. So in that aspect, if I have any pointer that whatever is causing the low mood, the anxiety may be biological, then there's a possibility, or there's a reason to liaise with the there's a need to liaise with the physician to do his or her assessment. So in the end, we are leaving no stone unturned. So stress has been like a cliche now. And then now, if you are talking about stress, everybody will quickly say, we all have been stressed and we have been managing it. Yes, we all have been stressed in one way or the other. Like Dr. Tamaklo rightly said, there are some levels of stress that you can actually manage on your own. I say everybody has a coping mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
and usually we cope with our own stress
Yeah.
when they are minimal. So
Mm-hmm.
when it gets to a certain threshold that we have exhausted our coping mechanism, or we may still have the coping mechanism, but the stress may be so high that we lose track of it. So it's like you have energy to walk, but you can be ill to the point that you feel weak. Your limbs are actually intact, but you cannot walk. So at that point, you will need support. So that is why there's a need to seek help or have some kind of support at some point in one's life. So mostly people can just walk in and say, I want to screen myself. I want to have a stress assessment and to see where my stress is, if it's I'm in the normal range, if I am going beyond my threshold, to see how I go about it. Stress can be psychosocial. Our relationship with people can cause some form of stress, and we are social beings. We interconnect with people, so we cannot be an island. We cannot be alone. And in our interaction with people, mostly we are stressed. So that if whatever is causing you to be stressed is based on your relationship, we term it as psychosocial stress. It may be your work colleague, your wife, your children. And so at that point, it could be an trigger therapy to help you manage yourself, build your own boundaries, so that whatever is causing the stress.
So I'd like to ask you a question, because you mentioned something which I didn't want us to lose. And that was really, you talked about coping mechanisms, whereby, and I didn't want people to miss it, because I know you gave a lot of information, and there was something there about how people cope. And, you know, we in our society, we see people who go out, you know, for drinks after work. And something that we actually think is quite normal is an actual coping mechanism. And can you share a bit about some of these coping mechanisms that people use to deal with stress?
All right, Doc. Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, coping mechanism generally is what we do to get ourselves out of unpleasant situation, to elevate our own mood, and to feel relaxed. Some of them are healthy, others are not. So coping mechanism, usually you bring up your coping mechanism when all is not well with you. So the situation is that you don't feel okay, and you want to feel okay. And anytime your emotions are affected, judgment is altered a bit. So using substance to cope is not healthy, because you may not be able to judge what is okay for you. So you cannot actually get to your limit. You are likely to exceed your own limit. So it's advised that alcohol and some substance, nicotine and stuff, is not advisably used as a coping mechanism, because there's a likelihood for you to go overboard, and then addiction may set in, which you may have to manage. So some of the other unhealthy coping mechanisms, some people would want to go for a ride. It may be okay depending on the mood you are, but we all know that sometimes in the mood, if you're in an upsetting mood and you're going for a ride, there's a likelihood of you hurting yourself in the process. So it may depend on how you feel at the time, and then how you can control yourself. Some of the positive coping mechanisms. So eating can be positive or negative depending on how it goes. Some people actually binge when they are stressed, so they eat so much sugar, and then it affects their health. Yeah, so anything that can be a good coping mechanism, depending on how it is used, can also be negative. But there are some that are actually harmless. So you can do a relaxation exercise, a breathing exercise, where you are not moving outside your comfort zone. You are focusing, paying attention to yourself, and taking in a deep breath, doing diaphragmatic breathing, getting your diaphragms engaged, getting enough oxygen into your brain, and you can actually relax. Sometimes listening to music can be a good coping mechanism, because some of the lyrics can comfort you. Some people would read, others would want to be alone or stay connected with friends. So if you're not in a very good mood and you have good friends around, you can hang out with them. If you want to open up, you may do so. Or if not, you can be with them. They can bring up stuff that will make you smile. So this is about coping mechanism. Yes.
And thank you so much. And apologies. I think that your mic has been, I mean, we've been trying to sort out the mic whilst you were talking, because I really think that you were saying so much. And I hope those who are listening were able to capture some of that information. I mean, when you were talking about coping mechanisms, and the reason why I brought it is because people underestimate what they are using to cope. And actually, you see it a lot of times. You see people talk about food. You know, this is whereby, unless you slow down and you're able to identify that every time you feel down, you take chocolate. I think that's something that we all talk about, chocolate, or sometimes we eat a lot. So identifying that it's normal to have these desires to want to eat chocolate, not a problem. But really where it starts to become a problem is when it's being used to tackle a problem that is underlying. And that is whereby you might be feeling sad or anxious and you start to use it in the wrong way. You might not realize it, but then that's really what makes people then go through a process where they start to put on weight. And when you ask the questions, you identify that they put on weight at a certain period of life when things were going when things were challenging. And so identifying that food can become a coping mechanism that can be used detrimentally, alcohol, but also, going out and doing certain things can also become addictive, and that causes a problem. So thanks a lot for sharing that. And you also mentioned about the diaphragm. I remember when I was meeting with you, one of the first sessions I had with you was about breathing. And you mentioned something which I'll always remember. You said to me, you have permission to relax. I don't know if you remember that, but you said, I had permission. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I've not actually given myself permission to relax. I'm constantly tense. And so when you made that statement, I didn't know that that was a problem. I had to mentally think, oh, I give myself permission to relax. And then we did the breathing exercise, which you talked about. So, I think that's really amazing for me because I even had to go through that breathing exercise and I used it all the time. So I don't know if you're still here. What would you say for someone? What would you say for someone who thinks everything is fine, but then their family members are saying there's something wrong, or maybe the family members cannot even say to them that there's something wrong because they're like, "Oh, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me." How does someone like that even realize that they have a problem in the first place? Can you share some thoughts around that?
Yes, please. So there are times I've had a few people walk into my consulting room and their first statement is that I am fine. There's nothing wrong with me. My family members think I am fine. So sometimes it takes a lot of work to realize that everything is not okay with you. And I think it's because mostly we don't pay attention to ourselves a lot. We pay attention to external things and then we don't pay attention to ourselves, our inner self. So we only can realize that we are not well when we have exceeded a certain threshold. So for such people, they may be done the honor by their close, their significant others, people who are closer to them. The person observes you, how you talk, how bubbly you can be, how you joke, and all that. So if there is a change, they can tell. Sometimes they may prompt you, is everything all right? Looks like lately you are not of yourself. And the first answer will be, I'm fine. So it can be on and on and on. And sometimes getting such a person to seek help is difficult. But the family members can initiate a conversation that, well, we have been observing you and these are the changes. So if you are watching someone, then you need to make the difference clear. I know you to be this, that, and that. And now I see you to be this. So there should be a reason for you to change. If you want to talk about it with me, if you want to talk about it with a professional, it's fine. Sometimes the family members would not identify. Work colleagues can do that because stress and anxiety, depression can affect functioning at work. So your boss may say, no, you're not turning up as early as you usually would do. You are not communicating. You are becoming apathetic and all that. So if you are in a managerial position, you may have to watch your staff and to be able to tell that there's a change and find out what is causing the change so that we are not quick in judging that someone is becoming lazy or something. For the person himself, you need to pay attention to yourself and then we have to be true to ourselves. Mostly if there is a change, we see it. But because we pay attention to external stuff a lot, we don't know. So once you're out, just do a introspective watch. See, am I fine? What has been going on with me? How did I react to that situation that I would have been calm? So there are times that you react to a certain situation and then later you say, no, this is so not me. What is happening with me? So these are the ways that the people around us and ourselves can realize that everything is not all right. And so there's a need to seek help.
I love that because you actually gave some great advice for all of us. We all have family members. We all have friends and colleagues. And sometimes you don't really know what to say. But I think that what you gave as advice is that, for the person who's going through it, they might not even be aware that there's a problem. And if you just said, "Oh, are you okay?" they might say, "I'm fine." But what you said was that if you can show them, almost like a mirror, how they have changed. So you mentioned, "I know that you're normally calm. You're normally the one who's calming me or calming everyone else. But this time around, you've changed, and it's happened in the last 2 weeks." That might help the person gain more awareness. And I think that's what you're saying, is how do you get awareness of where you are, especially because it's so easy to look at what's happening outside of you, but we don't spend a lot of time looking at where we are at. And so that's really important for us to learn how to communicate with our friends and families, and also not communicate when it's too late, when the person has actually changed and no one said anything. And then everyone's like, "Oh, we never knew they were going through so much." So we need to start asking and really learning to support and be aware of these signs. So maybe, can I ask, there's a question from Grace, who is asking, what are some examples of good stress? Because stress in itself is not bad. I mean, there's actually, this thing that is there, stress. So what is an example of good stress? Is there such a thing or as good stress?
Okay. Yes. So good stress is what we call eustress. And and if you are about to have a good event, a wedding, a party, a graduation, sometimes the thought of it, the people coming in, how it's going to be like, makes you feel a certain way. You cannot eat, you cannot sleep. And they are sometimes actually a good stress if the person is not having social anxieties. So the good stress, they don't last. They don't cause you to have any physiological symptoms like palpitations, hyperventilation, insomnia, and all that. You are mostly in a good mood. So somebody can be lost in thought, and then you see that they are smiling all over. It may be a good stress. Now, the stress that we think are overwhelming or not good, sometimes they put us to our toes. If you have a deadline to meet, sometimes you need to feel a little bit of stress to get yourself up, get up and do something. Otherwise, sometimes if you are too relaxed, you won't do anything. So sometimes you need a push. And yes, in lower doses, stress is not bad because it gets us to do things, and then knowing that, well, if I don't do this thing, the feedback I'm going to have is not going to be good, gets you to work. So this is how good stress is. We are about welcoming your first baby. You don't know how it's going to be like. You're going to be a mother for the first time, a father, and then this comes with some stress, but they are used stress. They don't cause any harm, and they're not going to affect you. These are some of the good stresses that we have around. I think I've seen the second question. Can I go ahead and answer that?
Let me ask it so that you can clear. So Ivy is asking, is it true that some people use food as a coping mechanism? And I mentioned that before, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it true that some people use food as a coping mechanism, and does it have a negative impact on the individual? So please, Dr. Oheny, come in.
Okay, yes, it is true that some people use food to cope. Now, if we are going back to Sigmund Freud, who, as a psychoanalyst, and goes through the stages of development with us, there's a stage called the oral stage in one's life that we seek gratification from our mouth. So everything, like usually it starts at birth, everything a baby has, they put it in their mouth. It's all about gratifying the mouth. We outgrow this stage, but usually when we are stressed, we regress, we go back to that stage. So some people, not everybody, some people regress into the oral stage when they are stressed. And that all that they see, because they feel bitter, there's nothing to feel happy about. They want to practically or physically taste sweetness. So they want to eat. and mostly it is carbohydrates that they eat because it's sweet. So they can eat and eat and eat and will not feel that they are even. So in their tummy, they are in their stomach, they are full, but in their mouth they want to eat more. So people use food, they binge. People can eat and eat everything, and mostly it is carbohydrates that they eat. So this is how people use food to cope. And the negative effect it has is that much as you're eating too much than your body actually needs, then your metabolism is unable to work on it. Eventually, it gives you, you may have high cholesterol, you may have a lot of problems, your BPs are going up, and on and on and on. Some people cannot even sleep well if they eat too much. So it's going to give you a lot of troubles if you are using food as a coping mechanism.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think the reality is that sometimes, and I think your profession, even if you look at mental health, people are diagnosed because they came with a physical problem. And that physical problem was high cholesterol or high blood pressure. And then if they walked backwards, then they realized it was because of the stress or anxiety, or sometimes, one of the two. So I have a question from Zilla, who is asking, what do I do if I'm worried about my mental health? And I want to add to that question. I mean, for someone who is actually, working in their own office, and they don't have time. I mean, just a normal person who's just wondering, what do I do if I'm worried about my mental health? I mean, without seeing a doctor, or, what can I do myself? But can you please share some tips that you can give to people who might be worried about mental health? Do they go onto Google and start reading? What can they?
Okay, thank you. So worrying about your mental health. Now, if you begin to worry about anything, you need to pay attention to it. What is this about that you are worried? Could I be having a mental problem? Could I be having a stress that I am unaware of? So you would realize if there are some changes in your output, your communication, your social life. Usually, everybody zones in and out of one emotion and the other, and those ones are the usual as the human being. We react to situations. So if something is unpleasant and I feel upset for a moment and I'm fine, it doesn't necessarily mean that I may need to seek help from a professional or what. But I need to be aware. How do I manage it so that it doesn't go overboard? So worrying about your mental health, just take a deep breath. Just do a scan of yourself. How do you manage unpleasant situations? Do you always regret the way you reacted to situations? If you do, then you can make resolutions yourself to do better. If it's difficult, you can always have help from us. Now, for the person who is in his or her office and then want to manage their mental health, we all may not need a psychologist in our life. Like some people will never see surgeons in their life. Some people will never see nephrologists in their lives. So psychology, as being a special field, we all don't need it. We all have our own coping mechanisms. There's something we call self-care. So if we take our self-care seriously, we pay attention to ourselves. We do what makes us feel proud of ourselves, what makes us feel happy. We know when to be serious and when to let go, when to relax and when to have fun. We actually create time to pamper ourselves. Then we can have a balanced mental health such that we may not necessarily need a psychologist to go to therapy to do all that. So mostly we do not pay attention to our self-care. A lot of people are corporate and then we are almost always serious. And you realize that you can wake up, rush, go and sit in the office and you're actually not doing much. So if we take breaks, we know when to go for vacations in our own way, then we may not necessarily have to see psychologists to manage all this.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And maybe this is where I'll come in. And I mean, I think that we're still looking at how to manage your mic. So I'll ask that we kind of have some conversations. to look at how we can make sure the volume is coming through. But I heard a lot of what you said, and I wanted to share some of the things that I've done, because I remember in my story, I didn't need a clinical psychologist actually in the beginning, and I was dealing with a lot of stress. So, I mean, one of the first things which I had was taking leave. Now, I want to say that people sometimes can't take leave, and I've actually never been able to take long periods of time. But one thing that I realized was that even taking one day, if it was a Friday or if it was a Monday, gave me a bit more time to breathe, So sometimes taking a day, especially when you have a lot going on, it might be helpful. It might not, even if you don't have a day, half a day, to just do something that you'd enjoy. And I think I loved you said the self-care. And when we have things that we enjoy, it gives us life. So what are those things that you enjoy? It's sometimes very simple, and it might be that it's calling a friend you haven't spoken to for a long time, and not talking about work, but talking about the good old days. Something that takes you away from the environment you're in. It might be going to a park, or sometimes I used to go for a walk at Legon Botanical Gardens. It's just a place that we could walk, myself and my daughter. Sometimes it's actually playing with my children, and I actually think that we often are not playing in the silly games. We tend to do the homework and everything, but when you can just be silly, run around, it's all life-giving. And then obviously, I think like what you've shared with many people, self-care can also be taking, care of yourself. If you love the manicures, or actually spending a bit more time at the hairdressers, or even if you're a guy and is going to the gym, and actually or meeting some friends, all of these are really good, and will actually help balance. So thank you for that. We have a few more questions, and I'd like to maybe ask the two together. One is from Ikuya, who's asking, how important is one's social circles in managing stress? But the second question from Athena is, how do you build effective support systems? So if you can answer the two, Dr. Oheny, because I think that they're all about, one is about how important is it to have a social circle, but the other is also how do you build an effective support system? Please come in.
Okay, so I usually would ask my client, how do you describe your social life? And usually it's a difficult question for some people to answer. I think in that they become aware that, oh, I haven't actually had a social life. Or sometimes they have, but they do not know that it's part of their social circle. So for some people, going out physically is socialization. But your social circle, you can manage it such that, you see, there's something I call positive energy and then negative energy. Why are you with the people you are with? What do you want from them? What are you learning from them? In what way are they impacting your life? Is it positively or negatively? So if you have social circles, do you go to them and then feel worse after your interaction with them? Or do you go to them and feel better? We actually have control over our social circles, I think, with the exception of our family. Because for family, you cannot tell who becomes your mother or your father, but you can choose who becomes your wife, your husband, and that. So you can choose your social circle with your own purpose in mind. What do I want? What do I have to offer? So if you are in a social circle, it should be hand in hand. It should go hand in hand. You cannot be the one always giving out positive energy and not receiving any. You run out of your energy, and then who refuels it for you? So it should find yourself in a circle where you have all that. We can actually connect via a lot of mediums like we are doing right now. You can connect with someone and speak. Like Dr. Tamaklo said, it's not always about talking about work. Sometimes just laugh, just let yourself go, create fun, and do. Can you please repeat the second question? I think I've lost it.
Yeah, so it was really, how do you build an effective support system? So I think that's really the question. I mean, you can have a support system, but how do you make it effective?
Okay. Yeah, so you build your social support system based on your identified needs. What do you need? There are some people that can manage, they can build their boundaries. They have built their boundaries very well. So you come with your negative energy and it doesn't affect them. For others, they can't. So you should be true to yourself, know yourself, build a social network support system that you actually will feel good if you have to feel good. So you shouldn't feel obliged to make someone your friend or your social support system. It's a choice, actually. Some people don't do work with their parents as their social support system. They work with friends. So you should be mindful of who you choose so that at the end of the day, they are not making you feel worse. They are not judging you. They are being honest. If you are in a system, a social support system where you know your network, they are honest to you. They will tell you if you have done good. Then if things are not going well and they tell you, you will say it that yes, they're actually being honest, so you can do it. But if they're always negative, you cannot tell which one, when are they being objective and not. So this is how you build your social support system.
No, actually, and I want to share a few things as well as tips as well. I mean, there's a psychologist called Brene Brown. I mean, I know a lot of people have maybe even heard of her, but she talks about the vault. That when you look at friendships, and the vault is whereby in a friendship where someone is always talking about someone else, and they are breaking trust with someone else, you never really are sure if they are actually going to talk about what you are saying to anyone else. And so there's a certain level of mistrust. And she talks about how with friendships, the vault and the circle of trust is really important, because especially when you talk about positive energy, it's knowing that, yes, you might have many friends, but it's actually identifying the friends that you can truly be yourself. And the way you can be yourself is that you trust them by sharing openly about what you're going through and knowing that they're not going to use it somewhere else, so it's not going to find you. I think that the positive energy is really that you are giving and you are receiving, and it's choosing. I love that. I love that, because a lot of times we feel like things are being done to us, and we forget that we have agency, we can choose. But when we have a lot of things going, the only way we can come to that acknowledgement is to slow down. And that for me was probably the biggest thing. I think, I'm not sure you asked, I don't think you asked me the question about my social network, but I definitely was, I mean, I'm sure that I was very aware that I didn't have a social life. This was actually because I've been working so much that I found myself like, it was just work, 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 work. And I used to laugh, and I realized that I wasn't laughing. And so, it's figuring out who do I need to be with. And that was actually interesting, because then I looked and I scanned my friend circle, and then was connecting with people, specific people, in a specific way. So I think that was a great conversation. We are running out of time, and I just think that it's amazing that this is such a broad topic, and we need to have another session, because I really want to use the last few minutes for you to take us through a breathing exercise, if that's okay. Because sometimes people don't really know what breathing is, and maybe you might just help to position why it matters to take a deep breath from the diaphragm and what it does for us. But maybe I'll answer the last question on the chat. It's from Epic Prince, who's saying, in a cultural context where many people use how they dealt with situations as a scorecard, or dismiss any complaint or any anxiety complaint as weakness, how do you get people to open up? And maybe I want to take this because I want Dr. Oheny to really come in to take us through an exercise, if that's okay, of breathing. But, whereby we are in a society, I mean, a lot of things are not discussed. I mean, sometimes, and myself as a leader, sometimes it's more convenient to really, you need to get people's trust. And sometimes we feel like to get people's trust and to feel like we're competent, we need to be strong all the time. We need to be the ones who are in control. And our perspective of leadership is not necessarily right, because we see leaders all the time being accoladed, getting awards, or we see them at the end of the journey, but not when they were going through the really dark moments. We don't have enough pictures or people talking about those deep, dark moments. And so for me, for example, how do we get people to open up? It's for people like myself, people like you. It's for all of us to start sharing our stories and normalizing this, because it is normal to go through a stressful situation. I mean, we're just talking about one spectrum, but it's normal to feel low. It's normal to feel, anxious. And the question is really, what do we do about it when it happens? And how do we prevent it from escalating to the point where we are not coping? And sometimes, I mean, let me not mitigate that there are sometimes when we need actual physical solutions. I mean, some people need medication. Some people need a bit more therapy. So it's not to minimize and to say that it's all on one side. We are not doing that today. What we're trying to say is that for the majority of people, in some shape or form, they're going through some shape of mental health stress, or some way of actually dealing with their mental health. It's a tough conversation. So we want to normalize this for this meeting or this conversation. So I hope that you will open up about your struggles. You will open up about your story. You will start to normalize it. And it's in the beginning, it's scary, like that good stress. It's kind of in the beginning when you're talking about your story, your heart starts to pound a bit and you're not sure how it will be received. But I want to use myself as an example that I've always found that when I'm authentic and I'm myself, a lot of times, if you're in a good environment where there are people who you trust, or they're friends, or even people you don't, most people will respond to you in a positive way. And even if they don't, they will remember, because when they need it, when they need help, they'll remember to call you because you opened up. So let us really build some courage around opening up about our struggles, opening up about our challenges, especially when it comes to the area of our mental health. And like our body, we get malaria, we get colds. There are times when we're strong and sometimes when we're weak, and sometimes we need help. The same way for our minds, we need to do the same. So I think we've come to end. So I think, Dr. Oheny, would you just, 2 to 3 minutes, would you please take us through just a breathing exercise? Because I think it's so valuable for people to see how simple but how impactful that can be. Just breathing. Please come in.
All right. Yeah, so the breathing exercise, the diaphragmatic breathing exercise, please, wherever you are, I want you to just sit in a relaxed position. Ensure that your feet are flat on the floor, and then just taking a deep breath. But this breathe in, we are using your tummy and not your chest. So just push your tummy out. You can put one hand on your tummy and then push it out. Fill it with air. And then when I say breathe out, then you gently drop it and let your tummy be as it were. So breathe in by pushing your tummy all out as big as it can be. And then gently breathe out. Well, relax. We are taking it again. Breathe in. And out. For the last time, breathe in. And out. Now you can clench your fist. Make a fist, tighten up and bend your elbow as tight as you can make it, even to the point of trembling. And observe the discomfort. And at the count of 3, you will relax by letting go. 1, 2, and 3. Relax. Just feel the sense of relief that it comes with. So for the sake of time, we'll just do this. And I hope, yes, I really look forward to a phase 2 of this so that we can have some 10 minutes to do a full session of relaxation. But you can even do this if you feel stressed or anxious. Repeat it as many times as you want, and it can do you some good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oheny. As always, it was a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm really sorry we had such audio issues, because I think that next time we definitely need to have you where we can really have even more time for you to take us through the breathing. It is such a powerful tool. I cannot underestimate how powerful that is. Just breathing. And when I'm in a stressful meeting, there's lots of topics. I realize that my breathing is shallow. It's all in my throat. It's like, and I'm actually realizing I'm very tense. And I just remind myself, I just become aware of myself, and I remind myself to take a deep breath through my diaphragm and out. And actually, it does help me come back into the room. It slows me down so I can actually see what's going on. And it's such a powerful thing. I hope you really benefit from using simple tools like this. At the end of the day, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. I hope you've had some reminders of how simple sometimes it is to just be aware of ourselves. But I hope if you need any help, that you have people around you or you ask for help. Please don't keep it to yourself. And if all else fails, if you don't have anyone, we at NYAHU are here. There are also mental health. I see someone in the chat was from the country ambassador for Africa's Mental Health Matters in Ghana. There are a few great places for you to go to receive help. And so don't forget that it's not just one place, it's not just NYAHU, it's other places that are talking about this. So please start to engage in the conversation. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you had a great time, and we'll see you next month for another session. Take care. Bye-bye.